It started with silence. Not peace, but the kind that follows impact. The bird went down fast, blades tearing the night apart, and then there was only cold air, smoke, and the taste of iron. Bodies moved in slow motion, training, fighting panic. Someone called for overwatch, but comms were gone. The mission ended before anyone knew it had begun. Yet she crawled from the wreckage, bleeding, counting breaths instead of seconds, using instinct where orders had failed. That's what survival looks like, not glory, just the refusal to stop moving. You're watching The Fall at Echo Point, at Echo. Drop a comment. Tell us where you're tuning in from, because this wasn't about rescue. It was about what's left when rescue never comes. The aircraft moved through the dark like a slow, steady heartbeat in the sky. Inside the C-130, the world was painted in red light, a dim, unbroken glow that flattened faces into silhouettes. The floor vibrated beneath boots. Metal rattled softly in rhythm with the engines, and each breath clouded faintly in the recycled chill of altitude. The mission was already in motion, long before wheels ever touched the ground. Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren sat near the ramp, helmet secured, eyes half closed. Her hands rested on the straps of her pack, not gripping, just feeling their presence. She had done this 100 times, maybe more. Each operation began the same way: the hum of engines, the smell of fuel, the waiting. But this one felt different. Beneath the rhythm of procedure, something quiet lingered. Not fear, just a sense that the map didn't tell the whole story. Across from her sat Staff Sergeant Nolan Reyes, her second, a brawler by build, calm by nature. His rifle was already checked twice, his gear squared away like muscle memory. Next to him, Corporal Dean Carter bounced his knee in the low light, the youngest of the three and still carrying that restless energy of someone who hadn't yet learned to hide it. Warren noticed, not as judgment, but as pattern. Every team had its balance: the anchor, the steady hand, the untested fire. Hers was no different. The aircraft jolted slightly. The pilots up front were invisible behind their closed bulkhead door, but she could picture the cockpit lights, soft green, the slow movements of professionals who didn't need to speak. Below them stretched the Nevada desert, black and endless. A test range. Officially, a training exercise, according to the briefing. But Marines knew when something was off. The radio silence had come too early, the mission packet too thin, and the phrase recovery operation had been said once too many times. Warren's hand brushed the patch on her shoulder, a habit more than a gesture. The eagle, globe, and anchor caught the faint light, its edges worn smooth by years of sweat and dust. She had joined when she was 19, chasing structure in a life that had none. Now, at 34, she carried it like a second spine. Her body bore the miles. Afghanistan, Syria, and now this. She could feel them all, stacked like layers beneath the skin. The loadmaster signaled from the front, voice low over the roar. 10 minutes to drop zone. Warren nodded once, then checked her watch. 0450 hours. The air had that distinct tang of static and oil, the smell of work before dawn. She lifted her rifle, gave it a quiet once-over, then let it rest across her knees. Nolan caught her glance, just a flicker, and understood everything it meant. No words needed. Something about the hum of the engines felt heavier now, like the air itself was listening. Warren leaned back, the webbing behind her pressing into armor plates. Her gaze drifted toward the red-lit ramp, the faint outline of the night beyond. The desert below waited, silent and unaware, and she thought of the last mission that started like this. Routine, clean, forgettable. It hadn't been. The names still sat with her, even if she never spoke them. Marines learn early that instincts are rarely wrong. She wasn't superstitious, but she knew the feel of unfinished air, like static before a storm. The green light above the ramp flickered once, then held steady. 5 minutes. The loadmaster moved down the line, tapping shoulders in sequence. Carter's knee stopped bouncing. Nolan adjusted his pack. Warren exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that clears not fear, but focus. Outside, dawn was a thin blue line along the horizon. The mission brief replayed in her head. Locate the downed asset. Secure the data. Exfil within 30 minutes. Straightforward. On paper. But Warren had learned that the missions written in black ink often bled red before they were done. As the ramp began to lower, the roar grew into a living thing. Wind surged in, cold and raw, filling the aircraft with the scent of dust and distance. Warren's pulse slowed instead of quickened. This was the calm before chaos, the kind of calm only discipline could build. She glanced once more at her team. 3 silhouettes under red light, steady and silent. They believed they were going in to bring someone back. None of them knew yet that before this was over, they'd be the ones waiting for rescue. And, as the light turned green, and the night opened its arms, Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren felt that small, unmistakable pull in her chest, the one that whispered, "Something's not right." She didn't flinch. Marines don't. She just moved forward into the dark. The helicopter dropped low over the open water, its rotors carving the night into shuddering bands of sound and air. Below, the Pacific stretched like black glass, broken only by the white scars of surf against the island's shore. Inside, the team moved with practiced precision. No wasted motion, no words. Every man and woman aboard had done this enough to know the ritual by heart. Breathe slow. Trust the rhythm. Let the machine carry you until it's time to move. Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren sat nearest the ramp, gaze fixed beyond the open edge where moonlight cut through mist. Her body was still, but her senses reached outward, listening beyond the rotor wash, feeling the faint shift in air pressure that told her they were nearing land. She had always measured distance by instinct, not maps. Out there, the island was waiting, quiet, unmarked, and wrong in a way she couldn't name yet. At 0500 hours, the bird dropped to 50 feet and flared over the landing zone. The sea mist turned the light into haze, a silver veil moving through blackness. Warren signaled the team forward. Nolan Reyes was first off, followed by Dean Carter. 3 shapes vanished into darkness, boots sinking into wet sand, rifles shouldered, eyes scanning. Warren followed last, knees bending on impact. The wind hit cold and clean, salt, metal, and the faint chemical trace of fuel. The helicopter lifted almost instantly, disappearing into cloud. Its sound faded north, leaving only the hiss of surf and the distant groan of wind through trees. Silence returned like a weight. Warren felt it press against her helmet, her chest, the inside of her skull. The kind of silence that never belongs in a mission brief. She crouched, scanning the tree line ahead. The island was small, 3 miles across, covered in tangled brush and broken stone. An old listening post sat near the ridgeline, decommissioned years ago. That was their target. Retrieve the classified data left behind when the facility went dark. Simple on paper, but simplicity was a story written by someone far away. They moved inland, a slow, deliberate line through uneven ground. Every step placed, every motion mirrored. Carter took point. Nolan covered rear security. Warren tracked bearings and distance. No GPS, just compass and habit. The terrain shifted from sand to loose rock, then to scrub that rasped against uniforms and gear. The smell of salt gave way to the musk of wet earth and rot. The moon hung low behind cloud cover, turning everything into shades of silver and absence. An hour in, they reached the outer perimeter fence. Rusted, half collapsed. The old signage still clung to the wire. U.S. Government property. Restricted area. The letters looked ghostly in the low light, eaten away by years of salt wind. Carter cut the wire with quiet efficiency. Warren stepped through first, her rifle angled forward, light off. The facility was just ahead, concrete half buried in the slope, its door yawning open. Inside smelled of damp metal and silence. The kind of silence that follows after sound, not before it. Dust floated in the air like smoke. Warren's boots left faint impressions in the thin layer of sand and debris on the floor. The team fanned out, light beams slicing through darkness, tracing overturned chairs, scattered papers, rusted filing cabinets. It looked abandoned for years, yet something felt recent. On the far wall, a streak of dark red ran down to the floor. Not paint, not dust. Warren stopped, knelt beside it. Dried blood, maybe days old. A trail led toward the main operations room. Her breath slowed. Nolan's beam found the rest. A desk overturned, a half-crushed radio transmitter, and on the concrete floor, a single scratched message scrawled into the dust with something sharp. Stay outside. Warren's mind cataloged the scene. Signs of struggle. No bodies. No weapons. She could almost reconstruct it, someone trying to send a distress call, cut off mid-transmission. The coordinates they'd been given matched this bunker. So, where was the asset? The air inside was colder now. A faint hum came from deeper in the corridor. A generator, maybe. Or something left running. Carter stepped forward, but Warren lifted a hand. Movement. Discipline. Something about the hum didn't fit the acoustic profile of the room. It wasn't electrical, it was rhythmic, mechanical, repeating every 12 seconds, steady as a heartbeat. She checked her wrist display. The mission data uplink was showing signal interference. The frequency jam wasn't ambient, it was directed. Someone knew they were here. In that moment, the professionalism that had carried them this far began to feel like armor cracking from the inside. Warren's training told her to report and continue. Her instincts told her to pull back. Years of discipline kept her still. Nolan met her eyes. No words, just understanding. Carter shifted uneasily, scanning corners, breath loud in the mask. The bunker walls seemed to tighten around them, the way tunnels do before something collapses. They pressed deeper. The corridor narrowed, then opened into a command room. The flicker of a single monitor lit the space, static, white, and endless. On the console beside it, the same coded distress message that had brought them here blinked on repeat. Data recovered. Do not enter. The line between rescue and deception dissolved in an instant. Warren felt the shift like gravity reversing. The mission wasn't to recover anything. They were the variable being tested. Her radio crackled once, faint and fractured. A voice. Command, maybe. Cutting through interference. Proceed to then nothing. The line went dead. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hum stopped. The silence that followed felt alive, heavier than before. Warren exhaled, almost imperceptibly. She'd known it since the aircraft, since the quiet that didn't fit. They weren't here to extract someone. They were being watched. She raised her hand again, the silent signal to move out. The team turned toward the exit, but before they could reach the threshold, a single sound broke the air, faint, distant, unmistakable metal sliding against stone, the click of a weapon charging. Warren froze. Somewhere outside, the dark began to move. And, in that fragile calm, between realization and chaos, she understood the mission hadn't gone wrong. It had been wrong from the start. The explosion began as light, a flash that swallowed form, then shattered into sound. The floor lifted, air compressed, and the bunker came apart in a storm of dust and steel. Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren didn't hear it as much as feel it, a concussion that crushed the breath from her chest and replaced it with silence. In that instant, the command structure ceased to exist. The briefing, the objective, the lines of authority, all dissolved into fragments of red light and falling concrete. When she opened her eyes, the world had changed shape. The walls were canted, her vision a blur of dust and motion. Alarms wailed somewhere beyond the ringing in her ears. Her hand found the ground first, then her rifle. Training overrode thought. She rolled to cover, blinked through debris, and saw Nolan Reyes 20 feet ahead, pinned beneath a fallen beam. His leg was twisted, his face half obscured by blood and grit. Carter was gone. Warren's comm crackled once. a burst of static shaped like a voice, then nothing. The light from her helmet flickered, dimming as the backup battery strained. The air tasted of plaster and cordite. Each breath felt like swallowing smoke. Outside, gunfire. Not sporadic, patterned, controlled bursts, the kind of precision that came from ambush. She moved low, crawling toward Nolan, counting the rhythm of shots. 2 volleys to suppress, a pause, then 3. Whoever was out there knew how Marines moved. They were being herded. Warren reached Nolan and dug her hands beneath the beam. Too heavy. His eyes opened halfway. Confusion, pain, recognition. He mouthed something, but the words never reached her. She gripped his shoulder, steadied him, then scanned for Carter again. Nothing but flame at the corridor's end and the smell of burned insulation. The bunker, once their objective, was now their cage. She keyed her comm, voice calm despite the chaos. Vanguard actual. This is Recon 3-1. We're compromised. Do you copy? Static answered. Then a faint voice. Broken. Distant. Barely human. 3-1. Fall back to extraction. Grid. 7-0. The signal dissolved. The extraction was already being called in. They were cut off by distance and terrain. She looked at Nolan again. The wound in his abdomen pulsed with dark blood beneath his plate carrier. He knew. So did she. But Marines don't stop for knowing. She pressed the bandage, tightened the strap, moved him toward the wall for cover. Then came the next wave. Rounds punched through the upper corridor, the sound of impact, the brief sparks of metal on concrete. The ambushers were closing in, moving through the same entrance the team had used. Warren fired once toward the flash, the recoil, sharp, mechanical. The sound was deafening in the confined space. She felt the blast pressure rebound against the walls, turning the air itself into a weapon. Her movements were automatic. Shift, fire, breathe, check, move. But beneath the muscle memory, emotion built like pressure behind glass, grief not yet realized, fear refusing to surface. The ceiling groaned above. Dust fell in thin streams. The structure wouldn't hold. She hauled Nolan onto her shoulder, legs braced, every motion deliberate. Step by step, she moved through the broken hallway toward the secondary exit. Smoke rolled low, illuminated by orange glow from burning cables. The soundscape narrowed, distant shouting, intermittent gunfire, and the dull roar of collapsing metal. Somewhere beyond, Carter's voice cut through the radio for a split second, distorted, screaming, then silence again. Warren's jaw tightened. She didn't need to hear the rest. By the time she reached the outer door, the firefight had shifted outside. Shadows moved in the tree line, muzzle flashes sparking against the black. She dropped Nolan behind a low berm of debris, scanned left, then right. No clear line to the landing zone. Above, the thump of rotor blades approached. Extraction had arrived. Too soon. Too far. She keyed her comm again, shouting into the interference, voice breaking against static. This is 312 down. We're at grid 7-0. Do not lift. I say again, do not lift. No reply. The rotors grew louder, closer, then receding. Command had written them off as lost. The mission was over. For a moment, she froze, caught between motion and disbelief. The light from the helo painted the clouds in flickering orange, then faded into distance. The sound diminished into the horizon, leaving behind the hollow echo of air and fire. That was the moment the structure of command, everything she'd built her life on, collapsed completely. Not from the explosion, but from abandonment. Nolan coughed. A wet, broken sound. She dropped to her knees beside him. His pulse was weak. His hand found hers, barely, before falling away. She reached into his vest pocket and found a small, torn photograph. A woman and 2 children. The corners worn thin. She folded it once, placed it inside her own vest. There was no ceremony, no time, just movement. She stayed there long enough for silence to become unbearable. The flames crackled through what was left of the bunker, wind moving ash like snow across the sand. The air was thick with the metallic tang of spent rounds and heat. Then she stood. The horizon glowed red, not dawn, but fire. The trees bent under wind from the departing aircraft, the sound fading into the kind of silence that only follows betrayal. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. Every movement was deliberate again, the rhythm of someone who refuses to stop moving because stopping would mean remembering. Warren adjusted her pack, slung her rifle, and stepped into the open. The island stretched ahead, a ruin of smoke and shadow. The mission had become something smaller now, stripped of orders and objectives. It was no longer about retrieval or command. It was about survival, and the quiet, human vow not to die here without meaning. Behind her, the flames swallowed what was left of the facility. Ahead, the dark waited, vast and indifferent. She took one last look toward the sky where the helicopter had vanished, the light already gone. Then she began to move again, alone, methodical, silent, toward the edge of the island and whatever waited beyond. The night no longer belonged to command, it belonged to her. When consciousness returned, it came as sound first, a deep, endless ringing that filled the silence like pressure underwater. Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren lay half buried in the remnants of the bunker, her face pressed against cold stone. Dust clung to her lashes, her breath shallow, uneven. The world was dark and heavy, each heartbeat felt like impact. She didn't move at first. She listened. That was training. Always listen before you act. But there was nothing. No gunfire, no shouting, no engines, just the slow hiss of wind through broken concrete. The ambush was over. What was left wasn't a battle, just aftermath. Her body registered damage before her mind did. Shoulder dislocated, shrapnel across her left thigh, a gash along her ribs. She tasted blood, metallic and dry. Every breath came with a catch of pain. Still, she catalogued each sensation like an after-action report, filed from inside her own body. She shifted her arm, grit grinding under the fabric of her sleeve. Her fingertips found her pack, half torn but still attached by a single strap. She pulled it close, dragged herself free inch by inch, each motion a negotiation between will and gravity. When the last of the rubble slid away, she collapsed onto her side, lungs seizing against the cold. Outside, the wind had changed direction. The sea carried salt and ash. The sky above the collapsed structure was pale with smoke. She couldn't tell how long she'd been out. Minutes, maybe hours. The sun was still below the horizon, the world caught in that colorless hour between night and dawn. She forced herself upright, resting on her elbows, a hand pressed against the wound at her side, wet, but not arterial, manageable. She reached into her pack and pulled a field dressing, tearing it open with her teeth. The motion was slow, deliberate, ritualistic. Tape, pressure, secure. A process repeated enough times to replace fear with rhythm. Pain came and went in waves, but she welcomed it. Pain meant function. Pain meant alive. Her rifle lay a few feet away, half buried in debris. She crawled to it, dragging one leg uselessly behind her. The metal was warm from fire, the barrel scored but intact. She checked the chamber. One round. The magazine was gone. She ejected the casing, pocketed it out of habit. Some part of her brain still believed procedure mattered. A broken radio sat near the bunker's edge, half covered in soot. The casing was cracked, antenna sheared off. She turned it over, checking the power indicator. Faint light flickered once, then died. She exhaled, the sound somewhere between frustration and acceptance. Then she began to work. Her fingers moved with mechanical calm, removing the battery, cleaning the terminals with a strip of gauze, splicing wire from the damaged headset cord. She scavenged a length of comms cable from Nolan's discarded pack nearby, attaching it to a rusted metal pipe that rose through the concrete. Improvised antenna. It wasn't hope. It was habit. Marines are trained to fix things that should already be gone. Each movement hurt, each minute stretched thin, her vision blurred, but she forced focus. Breathe in, work, breathe out, reassess. Sweat cut through the layer of dust on her face. When the device finally sparked to life, it emitted only static, a soft, endless ocean of sound. Warren adjusted frequency, scanning the spectrum. Nothing. Then, faintly, a pulse, a steady repetition of code, automated, inhuman. She closed her eyes and listened. It wasn't rescue. It wasn't anyone. It was just a machine still doing its job, a relay beacon that had survived when everyone else hadn't. But in the hollow of that sound, she found something to hold on to. Not meaning, just motion. A sign that systems still existed somewhere beyond this island, and that she could still reach them. She keyed the transmitter once. No reply. Again. No change. She pressed the button one last time, her thumb shaking, and left it transmitting on loop. The signal would go nowhere, but it was the act that mattered. The act said she wasn't finished. She rested for a moment, eyes closed, body trembling. In the silence that followed, memory surfaced like a tide. Nolan's face in red light, Carter's nervous grin, the helicopter fading into the distance. None of them left to speak for this mission. None, except her. Warren dragged herself toward the outer slope of the bunker. The incline was steep, littered with stone and metal shards. She began the climb on her elbows, pulling her body upward one movement at a time. Every breath tore through her chest. The weight of her gear became an anchor, but she refused to shed it. Marines don't leave what's theirs. Her hands bled against the rock. Wind whipped through the openings in the cliff, carrying the scent of the sea. Each movement was smaller than the one before it, but each one mattered. Halfway up, she paused, head against the stone. Her heartbeat matched the distant pulse of the broken radio. Steady, mechanical, imperfect. She muttered under her breath, the first sound she'd made in hours. Echo burns at dawn. It was an old saying. Something passed through units long before her time. It meant endurance. It meant that whatever fire came, you held until morning. The phrase became her rhythm. Each pull upward came with the whisper of those words, barely audible against the wind. Echo burns at dawn. Again. Again. The sky began to change. A faint blue edge broke across the horizon, light filtering through the mist. Her limbs felt foreign now, more intention than muscle. She reached the top of the cliff as the first color touched the sea, the line between darkness and survival drawn thin as breath. Warren collapsed onto the ridge, gasping, her hands pressed into the soil, real earth, dry and solid. The island stretched beneath her in ruin. The bunker was gone. The radio's faint signal still whispered somewhere below, looping endlessly. She looked toward the ocean, where the last of the smoke drifted east. The world was quiet again, not empty, but waiting. For a long time, she didn't move, just breathing, counting the seconds between each inhale. Then, slowly, she sat up. The light reached her face, soft, gold, almost unreal. She touched the patch on her shoulder, now torn and blackened, and felt the worn edges beneath her fingers. She didn't pray. She didn't speak. She just stayed there until the sun cleared the waterline, and the first warmth touched her skin. The mission had ended in betrayal, but the dawn meant something else. It meant that survival itself could be defiance, quiet, stubborn, absolute. Elise Warren watched the horizon ignite and whispered the words one last time, steady and certain. Echo burns at dawn. The rotors came first, a low, rhythmic tremor that carried across the cliffs like a heartbeat returning to the world. Wind tore through the broken ridgeline, pushing waves of ash and dust into the open air. Below, the remains of the listening post lay silent, reduced to angles and shadows. Through the haze, the helicopter hovered, its lights cutting white arcs across the terrain. Static filled the comms as the search team scanned for movement. "Thermal's got something," one of them said, though no one could hear it clearly. On the ridge, a shape moved, crawling, slow, almost imperceptible. The heat signature flickered faintly against the cold rock. Small, human, impossible. For a moment, no one on the aircraft believed what they were seeing. The mission logs had marked all personnel as KIA 48 hours prior. And yet there she was, Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren, dirt-caked and broken, dragging herself toward open ground. Her uniform hung in tatters. The left sleeve was torn at the shoulder, her side wrapped in improvised bandages that had long since bled through. One leg moved stiffly, the other only when momentum demanded it. She was crawling toward the sound. The pilot banked hard, bringing the helicopter lower. Rotor wash hit her like a storm, pushing debris across the ridge. The searchlight locked on, turning night to sterile white. For a moment, she froze, the instinct of someone who has been hunted too long. Then, slowly, she raised one arm. No celebration, no flare, just movement, deliberate and steady, as if she feared the act of being seen might shatter the fragile thread holding her to this world. The rescue team descended fast. The medic hit the ground first, followed by 2 Marines securing the perimeter. Their boots sank into dust and loose gravel, rifles angled toward the tree line out of habit more than threat. When they reached her, they stopped. Not from hesitation, but disbelief. The reports hadn't exaggerated the blast radius. No one should have survived it. Warren's eyes fluttered open at the sound of footsteps. Her pupils contracted under the glare of the searchlight. She saw silhouettes, helmets, rifles, gloves reaching for her. The medic knelt, pressing fingers to her neck, pulse weak, breathing shallow. He whispered something, but she didn't hear the words. The only sound was the rotors, constant and consuming, and the faint electronic whine of his scanner. She felt the sting of a needle in her arm, then cold spreading through her veins. Her body wanted to let go, but her mind refused. She'd come too far to pass into silence now. The crew chief's voice cut through the noise, a short, sharp command to lift. The pilot acknowledged, urgency flattening tone. The landing zone was compromised. Secondary fires were spreading. They had 90 seconds. The medic tightened the harness around her chest, lifting with help from another Marine. Her vision swam, everything framed in motion and blur, boots kicking dust, light cutting through smoke, the taste of salt and metal. As they neared the helicopter, she saw it the patch on the crew chief's sleeve, the same insignia she wore, the same unit that had left her behind. The recognition was quiet, almost gentle, a shared truth neither could say aloud. When they loaded her into the aircraft, the floor vibrated beneath her back. The smell of fuel and hydraulic oil filled the cabin. The medic's hands moved with mechanical focus, securing lines, monitoring vitals. Numbers appeared on the small screen beside her, red against black. She couldn't make sense of them. Only the sound mattered now. The deep, resonant pulse of the blades, steady and endless. Outside, the first light of morning broke through cloud. It wasn't bright, but cold, the kind of light that revealed everything without warmth. The helicopter tilted, climbing over the ridge. From her angle, Warren could see the island falling away beneath them, the bunker reduced to ruin, the coastline washed in gray. For a moment, she thought of the others. Nolan, Carter, the faces already fading into silence. The aircrew's eyes avoided hers, not from guilt, but reverence. They understood what survival meant, not triumph, but burden. Inside the cabin, the sound was all rhythm, rotors, heartbeat monitor, wind tearing through open space. Warren's hand twitched once, a faint motion near her chest. The medic reached to steady her arm but stopped when he saw what she held. The folded photograph, edges burned, still tucked beneath her vest. She pressed it against her chest weakly, her eyes closing with the motion. The aircraft banked east, sunlight washing through the cabin in fractured beams. Her skin glowed pale beneath it, dust drifting around her like faint smoke. In the distance, another helicopter joined formation. The radio crackled, voices exchanging coordinates, clearance codes, flight time, bureaucracy returning like gravity, the system reabsorbing what it had lost. Warren's breathing steadied under sedation. Her body was still broken, but the fight was over now. The kind of ending that doesn't feel like victory, just survival measured against everything left behind. The medic adjusted her blanket, checking vitals once more. He didn't speak. None of them did. Words didn't belong in this kind of silence. The horizon widened ahead, ocean stretching endless, sky open and cold. Behind them, the island burned in quiet retreat. In the cabin, the light flickered across her face, pulse monitor beeping in slow rhythm, each tone a reminder that she was still here, alive, changed, bearing what others could not. As the helicopter cleared the last line of cloud, dawn finally broke in full, gold cutting across gray, light spilling into the cabin. The sound of the rotors became steady, rhythmic, almost human. Gunnery Sergeant Elise Warren lay still, eyes closed, as the light touched her face. The Marine who had been written off as gone now returned, not as a hero, but as proof that endurance itself can outlive the mission. And as the aircraft disappeared into the horizon, the island beneath them faded to silence. The kind of silence that comes not from absence, but from reverence. What would you have done when the dust settled and the radio stayed dead? When the sound of your own breath was the only proof you were still there? She made a choice. No one trains for to keep moving when everything said stop. That's what endurance really is. Not strength, but the quiet refusal to surrender. Every scar has its own frequency, and if you listen close, you can still hear it hum through the wind. Tell me what you'd have done. I read everyone. If this story reminded you that survival isn't noise, it's rhythm, subscribe and stay with us for the next run. Share this with someone who's forgotten what silence can teach. The field's cold now, the mission written and sealed, but out there, beyond the static and the flame, the story still breathes. Extraction complete. Next horizon's waiting. Stay in the fight.